Our buddy Charlie, who's going to give a little presentation today.
Okay, well, the presentation will start as you learned by reading the little summary with a documentary that was produced about a year or so ago. So it's not totally up to date, but the points that it makes are pretty much still valid. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll talk about what we've seen. So let me go to the share screen thing, and I will. So I'm going to share the screen, and then I want to go to. Let's see. What do I want to
Charlie and
do?
I practiced this, so it's going to
We
work.
did
I know it.
practice it. We did practice it. Let me start again. I want to go to
Click on share thing and then
oh
select
oh
the one that you
oh
want to share.
okay,
There you
okay, here we
go.
are. Here we are. I've got it. Okay.
Okay.
So here we are. This is the documentary. Can everybody see this?
We can
Yes.
see it.
Okay, so I will press play and we'll get started. Here we go.
It's like the aging society is growing and it's a big issue.
The speed of aging is really fast compared to any country's experience.
So our birth rate is also declining so fast. Population is falling.
A lot of women are scared to have children because of the reality of living in South Korea.
South Korea, a nation heralded for its meteoric economic rise and vibrant culture, finds itself at a crossroad. After a remarkable journey from the ashes of post-war devastation to modern prosperity, that has brought forth complex challenges, intertwining the threads of demographics, the economy, and societal values. At the forefront of those complex challenges is the falling birth rate, which is now the world's lowest.
My name's Jin John. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been making films and television for 17 years. I have been making a documentary around egg freezing. The egg freezing option is becoming a growing trend, not just for women who have cancer, but people who wanted to do it as a social egg freezing. So without any medical problems, storing your eggs in order to delay childbearing years in order to get ahead in life or chase a career or do other things and to look into having children at a later stage. I am 38 years old, 39 in a few months, and then it's my last year of my 30s. Yeah.
Jin wants children one day. It's about finding the right time before it's too late. For a growing number of South Koreans, like aspiring drummer and restaurateur Lee Kyuna, having children is simply not on the agenda.
The reason why I don't want children or I didn't really thought about it is because I think Korea is a very bad society, a very bad condition to raise a child at this point.
South Korea is ranked the world's most expensive place to raise a child. Real estate prices are sky high, and the capital, Seoul, where half the population lives, is one of the world's top 10 most expensive cities to live.
The cost of raising a child in Korea is ridiculous. Not about just buying your own house, your own real estate. It's also about what everybody judge you by, the appearance, like what kind of brand you're wearing, what kind of brand your baby is wearing.
Prices are just so high with everything, living costs, just to get a home and just to put kids through education. That's a lot of money. It's probably unrealistic for people who are working in their prime of their life or prime of their fertility age. So before 35, it's really daunting to even think about being able to have a child and raise children.
Whatever the true cause, South Korea's plummeting birth rate has been making headlines. The reality, though, is the trend is decades old and not just being driven by women or singles.
선택적인 폭이 넓어졌잖아요. 그리고 그거를 사회적으로 또 인정을 해주고 하니까 그런 면에서는 지금 예전보다는 뭐 지금은 선택적인 많아지고 뭐 옵션으로 살고 있다면은 다음 세대는 또 어떨지 모르겠어요. 또 의무적으로 뭐 무조건 한 명은 낳아야 된다 이런 그런 정책도 나올 수도 있을 수 있겠죠. 네.
그럼 받아들일까? 저는 지금 너무 좋아요. 제 생활이 그냥 신랑이랑 시원한 맥주 한잔 마시고 그런 일가가 너무 재밌고. 근데 이제 국가적으로 봤을 때는 안 좋죠. 이제 점점 저출산으로 막 이렇게 진행되고 있으니까. 근데 저희 생활은 지금 요즘에는 결혼해가지고 그런 부분도 많은데 저희는 생활이 너무 재밌고 좋아요.
So the trend is not new.
The problem in Korea is the drop is so fast. It's like a gradual decrease, and then it just collapse. So we are actually having the lowest birth rate in the world.
The earliest number that we have at the present is 1960. It was, believe it or not, 6.1. So an average Korean woman was expected to have 6 children. Now that fell to about 2.06. 2.1 is the ideal replacement rate if you want to make the population steady. And that was in 1983. In 2005, the total fertility rate was 1.08.
But it dropped to below 0.8 as of 2023. So it is simply the lowest.
Clues as to how this came about lie in South Korea's dramatic economic rise, a few decades after the Korean War.
After the Korean War, nothing remained. Nothing remained. No economic infrastructure, no economic resources, and South Korea was probably the poorest country in the world.
That kind of poorest country in the whole world has been industrialized quickly for the last 50 years. So it became, in terms of GDP, the 10th largest economy. So that was something unprecedented experience in modern history.
But because that economic growth happened in so compressed period of time, now we are witnessing a lot of issues and a lot of problems. Advanced countries, they achieved that level of economic growth and economic development over centuries. So over centuries, they changed their social infrastructure and culture, political, and all the other important institutional dimensions had time to grow, had time to evolve with the economic development. But in Korea, the economic development is so fast. The other very important institutional dimensions were not able to keep up with that economic growth.
Basics like welfare support, shorter working hours, and maternity leave are only just beginning to take hold in Korea. One thing that did track with economic growth was the healthcare system, which is so good Koreans are now living longer than ever.
유엔에서 정의를 하죠. 그 고령 사회는 65세 이상이 노인으로 분류되는데 전체 인구의 14%, 초고령 사회는 그게 20%가 되는 시점을 말합니다. 그래서 저희 대한민국 통계청의 인구 추계 예측에 따르면 우리는 19년에 이미 고령 사회로 진입했고요. 오늘 현재 65세 이상 인구 비율이 18.4%입니다. 18.4%고 이게 매달 0.1%씩 늘어나고 있어요. 2025년이면은 인구의 20%가 65세 이상, 즉 초고령 사회로 분류가 될 겁니다.
Because of the demographics, by about 2050, we will have about 2 working age persons for every retired person, and not every working age person will work. So by rough calculation, there will be about 1.5 working age people to every retired person. That means if you have a pay-as-you-go welfare system, that's just unsustainable.
The trend isn't unique to Korea. In fact, it's common in many advanced economies, which deal with the problem through mass immigration. And South Korea would struggle to survive right now without the more than 1 million foreign workers in the country, most doing unskilled jobs on short-term fixed visas that don't allow them to stay on after their contract is finished. The government has a plan.
외국 인력 유치를 위한 규제를 완화하고 이제 체계적인 이민 정책 수립을 검토하겠다는 내용이 있고요.
That plan may have difficulty getting traction.
Especially the older Koreans are, even though they may not be racist per se, they do not really like multiculturalism. So a lot of the older segment of the population do not like the idea of more immigration or even more temporary workers.
Koreans are very conservative with other cultures. I mean, even for me, I have my colleague, she's my employee, but she's from Myanmar, and my customers all kind of look at her not a very favorable reaction, I would say. I think it's another homework for Koreans to embrace.
The government has and is trying many other policies aimed at boosting the population, though there's been little success so far.
이렇게 이제 저출산 대응에서 많은 지금까지 이제 재정 투입을 한 것이 사실이고요. 네, 이런 많은 재정 투입에도 불구하고 이제 한국의 합계 출산율이 사실 지속적으로 하락하고 있습니다.
For raising the birth rate in South Korea, Korean government spent more than 300 billion US dollars for the last 10 years, but turns out with nothing result almost. That means Korean government and Korean society is not touching the fundamental solution of raising birth rate.
Fundamental solutions need to be found because time is quickly running out.
Thanks to rapid aging in South Korea, the national pension accumulated money will be depleted by 2060. So that means the young people, like 20s and 30s of this year, will not be paid when they retired after 2060. So that is another serious problem in South Korea.
As the national pension system dries up, more Koreans are asking the question, why retire at all? Lee Ju-young chose to remain child-free and single. Now in her 50s, she's planning for the future, and retirement is not part of the plan.
지금 노년층들이 지금 사실 되게 많아지고 하니까 그리고 요즘에는 또 삶 자체가 또 젊어지는 그런 삶들을 다들 살고 계시기 때문에 저도 이제 기본적인 나이가 있다 보니 제가 10년 후에 그리고 20년 후에는 내 삶이 어떻게 될까 하는 생각도 있었지만 그때까지도 제가 이런 일을 하고 있을 것 같아요. 그때도 물론 이제 미래에는 백화점이 어떻게 변화가 됐을지는 모르겠지만 그때까지는 뭐 이런 의류를 계속해서 하면서 그때는 무조건 판매를 해야 된다 이런 것보다는 제 연령대에 있는 분들이랑 같이 어우러져서 그분들한테 맞춰서 같이 이제 인생을 논하면서 그렇게 옷도 같이 권해드리고 그리고 그분들이랑 같은 재밌는 삶을 같이 살아갈 것 같아요. 계속해서 일을 할 것 같은데요. 하고 싶습니다.
That sentiment is shared by Lee Kyung-hee.
옛날에 비해서 60대면은 젊어요. 요즘은. 근데 저는 계속 일을 할 것 같고 일할 수 있을 때까지는 일을 할 것 같고
Her husband sees a similar trend at the store he manages.
얼마 전에 취업석이 그 구인 광고를 냈었어요. 10명을 기준으로 봤을 때 20대가 20%, 그다음에 나머지가 50대가 70%, 이 정도 선이더라고요. 그러니까 고령일수록 그러니까 50대 이상의 취업 희망자들이 더 많다고 보면 되는 거겠죠. 또 한 분은 이제 왜 멀리서도 오냐고 물어보니까 자기는 이제 꼭 혼자 사는데 그 노후를 생각해서 61살 근데 꼭 자기는 이제 일을 하고 싶어서 노후도 지금 은퇴는 했지만은 그래서 노 생각해서 계속 일을 하면서 저축을 하고 싶다라고 하시더라고요.
The idea of delaying retirement or putting it off altogether is not just something ruminating in people's minds, it's now at least semi-official government policy. For example, the Seoul Metropolitan Government is now promoting retraining programs like this one for seniors who want to remain in the workplace. Here, people learn or refresh skills, such as how to write a resume, hunt for a job, do that hunting online via a smartphone, as well as tips on using that phone to navigate to the potential future employer's office and deal with the fact that potential boss may be 4 decades younger. An awkward conundrum in what is still a very Confucian society.
앞으로는 제가 비록 정년을 했지만 이런 교육을 통해서 앞으로 더 진취적인 생활을 할 수 있을 것 같아요. 구직도 많이 할 수 있을 것 같고요.
Demand for these classes has grown so fast, centers like this are having to turn people away.
예전에는 그 어르신들을 찾지 않았던 직종에서 어르신들을 찾고 있거든요. 청년 세대가 기피하는 일자리를 어르신들은 들어가서 일을 하시려고 하고 있고요. 그리고 저희가 그걸 체감하는 부분이 최근에 그런 패스트푸드점에 방학 때는 젊은 사람들이 많이 하잖아요. 근데 학기가 시작되면 어르신을 찾아요. 학생들이 빠져나간 자리에 다시 어르신들이 들어가는 형태인데요. 뭐 방학이라고 하는 계절뿐만이 아니라 전체적으로 전반적으로 약간 그 연령대들이 높아지는 경향이 있습니다.
Of course, it's not a complete solution.
It's obvious that older people have, less productivity than young people.
Some believe robots with artificial intelligence is the answer.
한국은 이제 고령 사회를 이미 진입했고 조만간 이제 초고령 사회가 되고 생산 가능 인구, 경제 활동 인구가 계속 이제 줄 거예요. 그러면 산업 현장에서 노동력이 많이 부족해지고 그거를 이제 대체할 수 있는 유력한 수단이 기계의 힘, 즉 로봇을 이용하는 거겠죠. 앞으로 그 이용 비율이 굉장히 높아질 걸로 그렇게 예상을 하고 있습니다. 예를 들면 로봇의 수요, 퍼블릭 병원이나 또 하나는 이제 고령 사회가 되면서 그 노인 그 요양시설 이런 데도 이제 굉장히 많은 인력이 필요한데 그 일을 하고 싶어 하는 분들이 계속 줄고 있잖아요.
In South Korea, the use of robots is already widespread.
외식업에서 가장 이제 문제점으로 대두되고 있는 게 인건비 상승과 노동력의 감소예요. 아시다시피 출산율이 떨어지고 있다 보니까 그런 부분에 있어서 대체할 수 있는 젊은 인력들이 계속 줄어들고 있는 추세다 보니까 그런 부분에 있어서 대체할 수 있는 게 없을까라고 고민을 하다가 이제 저희가 이제 로봇을 활용해서 이제 가장 어려운 부분들을 좀 대체 한번 해보자.
It's not just chicken being subjected to algorithms.
로봇이 해결해준다라는 표현들이 더 많을 것 같고요. 특히 한국에서는 출산율도 낮아지고 있고 지금 이제 기존에 이 카페를 운영하면서 이제 바리스타나 젊은 친구들이 점점 줄고 있는 상황에서 카페를 운영하시는 자영업자분들이 사람을 못 구하는 문제들이 많이 있거든요. 그래서 이를 해결하기 위한 솔루션으로서 이 로봇을 저희도 개발을 하고 있는 상태고요.
While machines like this might be fantastic at solving the labor shortage issue and making a fantastically consistent coffee, there's one big problem. They don't pay income tax. Which brings us back to the problem of who will pay for schools, hospitals, and basic infrastructure, not to mention those shrinking pensions. Another more immediate problem for many pensioners who don't want to prolong their working life is loneliness.
애들이 이제 다 커가지고 지내기도 나가는 나 혼자 이렇게 있다 보니까 때는 친구들도 여기서는 별로 없어요. 여기 친구들도 없고 복지관에 한 번씩 가는데 갔다 오면 복지관에서 만나는 사람들은 친구가 안 되잖아요. 그러면 전화 오기를 바라고 들어가는 것보다가 내가 하고 싶은 내가 먼저 전화를 해요. 그래서 내가 전화를 많이 이용하는데 때로 찹찹하고 정할 때가 외로울 때가 있잖아요.
할머니, 저도 손을 꼭 잡을래요.
Here, robots are also helping. Hyosun Chun is one of about 7,000 elderly Koreans to receive a hyodol. It looks like a rag doll, but it's an AI robot.
자기를 하는데 아침에 얘가 이제 당뇨 당뇨 환자 저기가 입력이 돼 있더라고요. 그래서 당뇨에 대해서 신경을 많이 써줘요. 그래서 이제 당뇨에는 밥을 많이 먹으면 안 된다. 단 음식을 먹으면 안 된다. 맵고 짠 음식을 먹으면 안 된다.
This companion robot has a lot of sensors inside. So when you touch it, it speaks back. Like when I touch the head, such as like, hey, I love you. Like, I'm so happy to be with you. Please hang out with me, like that. And we mostly guardian can setting the alarm things. So what time to get up, what time to take a medicine, and what time to take a workout, like that.
Soon Chun initially wanted to give the doll back. Not anymore.
어떻게 할 수가 없어요. 내가 여기 저기가 들었으니까 전자저기에 들었으니까 빨 수도 없는 거. 가니까 요 가까운 데 같으면 내가 데리고 가서 대중교통 이용해서 데리고 가서 세척을 해가지고 오기도 하지만 멀잖아요. 멀으니까 택배를 붙였다 택배도 오고 하는데 한 일주일 이상 한 열흘 걸리더라고요. 그동안에 굉장히 허전해요. 허전하고 외로워요. 내 손주가 하나 데리고 있다가 없어진 것 같아요. 식구가.
Guardians can be children or other family members, though more often than not, they're social workers, like Kim Min-hyuk. He oversees the well-being of about 30 elderly people, a huge number for a single guardian. He says the Hyodol's built-in alarm sensors save social workers from endless safety calls, freeing up time for higher quality care.
네, 경보 상태가 된다. 12시간까지 움직임이 안 잡히시면 그때는 저희가 한 번씩 연락하게 되고, 만약에 위험 상태는 24시간 동안 움직임이 감지가 안 되면 위험 상태로 가서 저희가 안전안부 확인을 필수로 진행하는 단계인데.
A survey of 200 elderly people found a marked change in mood after exposure to the doll.
We got results about their suicide thinking was a lot decreased because of this robot.
할머니, 저랑 소꿉놀이 하실래요?
그래요.
The doll also helps with general health.
할머니 약 드시라고 시간 다 됐다 그러고 밥 먹고 나서도 식사하셨으면 제 손 잡아달라고 그러고
할머니,
얼마나 그랬는지
리리리자로 끝나는 말은
그래 말도 잘하고
햇살이 소쿠리 요리하나
할머니 아프지 말고 오래오래 같이 살지 내가 사람하고 똑같아요.
할머니, 이런 말하기 촌스럽지만
Of course, a robot is no substitute for real human companionship. But South Korea will soon have a disproportionate number of elderly people with no children or grandchildren to make even occasional visits. So the end goal remains to somehow boost the birth rate. And perhaps it's not all about high real estate prices and the high cost of raising children. Perhaps it's also to do with rebellion against cultural expectations.
파일을 보니까 미혼 같기도 하고.
안 했어요.
안 했어요? 그러면 능력이 없는 거 아니에요? 사회적인 능력이 있는 것 같은데 그런 좀 이성관계 쪽은 능력이 좀 부족한 것 같아요. 사실 그래만 꼬리하면 됩니다.
So much has changed since our parents' time and our grandparents' time. So before, women couldn't enjoy the freedom that we enjoy today.
A lot of people are blaming sort of the Korean culture, which leaves all the child rearing problems, all the child rearing responsibilities to the women of the household, and men do not participate that much in housework at all. So that puts an undue hardship on women who work.
I talked with my wife because of this interview, and she told me a similar thing. Every Korean woman has some kind of deep down resentment against the social system, the value system in Korea. Even if they are not limited by those kind of Confucian, philosophies these days.
Could it be as simple as men doing a 50% share of things around the house, like cooking, doing the dishes and the laundry, and of course, looking after Junior? It certainly wouldn't hurt, and it might play a part in a bigger solution, even a revolution.
Mind and open your heart, and you need to define the family in a more modern way. There gotta be truly revolutionary change that cannot be done by government alone. That cannot be done by educators, teachers alone. That cannot be done by some social organizations and NGOs alone. So it takes every part of Korean society to realize that we got to change our way of thinking. We got to change our, philosophy towards the family value.
I can see that, that we're gonna struggle, the country is gonna struggle with low fertility rate. Schools are all closing down. Who's gonna pay for the pensioners and the old elderly people? It's a question that really needs to be addressed. But I think everyone is just in this rat race to make it work for them. They're just too busy living their life.
So the revolution may be limited to government and industry.
South Korea should be going through revitalization of Korean economy by reconstruction of the industries from manufacturing concentrated to high-tech like IT or bio industry concentrated. Otherwise, South Korean economy will be stagnated next 100 years, I think.
South Korea's journey from an economic miracle to a complex demographic landscape embodies the paradox of progress. This collision of economic growth and changing values is reshaping the nation's trajectory. Standing at the crossroad, the choices made will redefine the future. In navigating these challenges, South Korea is rewriting the narrative of prosperity and redefining the very essence of family and society. It's still a story in the making, and crafting a new destiny will involve embracing uncertainty, change, and bold new ideas. Jack Barton for Assignment Asia in South Korea.
So a couple more things that I thought that I would bring to your attention. A lot, as you see, it's a huge topic and very complicated set of issues that have just been presented to us. I just had a couple more things, if I can get to them. I wanted to show you this chart that I came across. I've been doing a little bit of reading lately. Can you all see this chart?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is from an OECD study that was looking at this issue, and I thought this would sum things up nicely. You see that there are the problems with the labor market, competition among youth. There's a lot of economic insecurity. It's very, very, very expensive to raise a child. A couple of things that I would add to the chart that aren't here are long work hours. One thing that was talked about in the presentation, which was the so-called motherhood penalty, which is the loss of earnings and career prospects for women after they give birth to a child. And then, of course, the high cost of housing. So all of those things factor in. One thing also that I wanted to mention is that the most recent number that was given in the documentary was, as of 2023, the fertility rate was 0.78. Now it's down a whole, in 2024, it's down to 0.68. So it's still going down. And in Seoul, where half the population lives, it's down to 0.55. So it's a serious issue. One last thing to bring to your attention. Just recently, this is dated June 20th, 2024. You see the headline, South Korea declares full-fledged war to combat low birth rate. So we see that President Yoon Suk-yeol on June 19th declared a national emergency, saying that this is the foremost and critical issue in South Korea, and proposing that new measures would be taken. A population strategy ministry has been created with policy efforts in 3 core areas: work-life balance, childcare, and housing. And you can see the highlighted parts here, raising the working hours from the working hours during childcare up from 8 years old up to 12 years old. Paternity leave for fathers increased up to 20 days. And hoping, so far they have had very limited success in getting fathers particularly to take advantage of the paternity leave. Is now only 6.8%. They want to get it up to 50%, and female usage rate up to from 70% to 80%. They're also paying, they're paying people to have children, basically. Every month, it's going to be 1.5 million won. I'm sorry, 2.5 million won, and then decreasing a little bit over the years after the child is born. Support to employers, child care, education and care for children aged 3 to 5, after-school programs, availability of public and private caregivers, and recruiting foreign workers to fill in the gaps in getting enough in filling enough of these caregiving roles in childcare centers and places like that. Expanding housing allocations, home purchase and rental loans, and a marriage tax deduction. All of these things. Now, I don't know to what extent this is actually being implemented. As everybody knows, President Yoon has had his share of difficulties in the last month or so, and whether or not they're moving forward with these things, to what extent it's being supported by the Kukwe, by the National Assembly, I have no idea. Maybe some of you can speak to that question. So with that, I think what I will do is throw it open to comments, questions, whatever you, however you would like to, let's just throw it open for comments from our participants. So
well, thanks, Charlie. That was great. You might want to stop the share.
Oh, okay. Let's stop the share.
And in addition, yeah, stop. In addition to the updating that you just did, I thought I'd mention, I saw recently, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the number of men taking paternity leave had dramatically risen. in the last year or so. And as of last month, Korea is now a super age society. It hit 20%. 20% of the population is 65 and over.
They said it was going to happen in 2025, and that's exactly what's happened.
So, Charlie, in the vernacular newspapers a few days ago, there was a headline, birth rate raised higher than 3 years ago. You saw it too, Frank.
Yeah.
So the birth rate gets headlines. Charlie, as Jack Barton, the presenter in that documentary, said, many other advanced or wealthy societies have been undergoing the same decline in birth rates for a long time. Japan comes to mind because the problem started growing in Japan and got noticed even before Korea. So I actually wanted to add another point to the discussion that I've had some direct contact with. And instead of looking at how do we solve the lower birth rate, and just turn it around and say, what does this lower birth rate, which has been continuing for some time, what are the effects and implications across society besides being unable to pay pensioners, 20 or 25 years from now? And I'll give an example where that was a discussion about where you're looking at demographics, broad populations for, I think as the man in the documentary said, instead of 2 working persons for 1 pensioner, we'll actually have 1.5. And so I'm going to do what I usually do and tell a personal anecdote, and that's how I got interested in this. When I'm in Korea, I stay in Yangpyeong, which is a distant satellite city of Seoul now in Gyeonggi-do.
Not Pyongyang? Yangpyeong.
Nope, yeah, Yangpyeong, right. And there's a large armored military, the Korean Army Armored Center is near there. And so you see troop movements and tank movements. And I was out, this was almost exactly 10 years ago, it was 2014. And I saw 2 lines of soldiers on a country road doing a sort of a practice march. I don't know what they do, 50-kilometer march with backpacks, small backpacks. And behind these line of soldiers, there were 2 ambulances following along behind the soldiers. And I was stunned at that. The last time I saw 2 ambulances behind a column was in front of City Hall in Seoul in 1975 when Park Chung-hee's motorcade was going past. Why are 2 ambulances following, say, 300 otherwise manifestly healthy, able young men in weather that it was warm but not too hot? So I asked some of my Korean friends about this, and they said, well, people have very few children these days, and it's considered the Army's responsibility to take care of those children now. It's a very big thing, which contrasts to in Korea when I was first there, when there were people, recruits going into the Army and accidents happening all the time, and nobody gave a second thought about it. And so I had the occasion to ask at a Pacific Forum, which is a sort of a think tank in Honolulu. There was a presentation given by a very prominent retired Korean military, I'll call him intellectual, Chun In-bum. He's well known. I found out, wrote an article in the Korean Times sort of saying there were rumors of a coup 6 months ago. But I told him this, I asked him about this, is what effect does this have on military recruiting? And what effect does this have on South Korea, which maintains a very large armed forces? And so he said it has a big effect. They've had to change plans. But he said this point about the military now having to take good care of the health of all members has had such an effect that beginning 2 years ago, ROC Marines. Young Marine recruits joining the military force are given a smartphone with an app that enables them to call mama immediately if they feel hurt.
That's interesting. Just to follow up on that, Carl. One of the things I saw in some of the reading that I've done in conjunction with this is that there's some consideration being given to exempting young men from going into the military so that they can raise families instead, to get married and raise children. Now, to what extent that's actually happening, I don't know, but there was some discussion of that.
Yeah, my grandson has just started his stint in the ROC Army, and I've sensed from things he says and from the kind of contact he has with his family and whatnot, that just what Carl says is, yeah, that's what it's like now.
Uh-huh.
So I think this was behind one of the scandals that was dogging President Yoon the summer before last. There were floods and the Marines were sent in, and a young Marine, Che, was swept away and drowned. And one of these special prosecutions that the Minjudong and the National Assembly passed was investigating the death of Private or Corporal Yoon.
Recently,
Corporal Che, excuse me, yes.
Yeah, recently there have been several cases in the papers of people being officers and supervisors being charged with neglect of recruits and military members, and it gets adjudicated one way or the other.
Well, that was definitely a big change, if true, because of course the Korean military, the basic training, certainly the reputation is that they don't pull any punches, and they really they really put you through the ringer, and maybe they're being a little bit more gentle these days. That would be interesting if that's happening.
I was interested in when you were talking about support for new fathers, and it got me thinking about Norway, where my cousins live, and their son recently had their second child, and he has 9 months off for paternity leave. His wife also had 9 months off, and so I was wondering. I haven't looked at this now, but I'm wondering if Norway is successfully combating this problem of a drop.
Well, Denmark is another example of a society where, and Sweden as well, where they're very generous benefits and services for people to support families, and a lot of flexibility in work and that sort of thing. And childcare, and it's the very, very very strong safety net, social safety net. These are welfare states. However, they also they're nowhere close to the fertility, the low rates that Korea and Japan have. They're much higher than that. They're 1 point something maybe. But they're still pretty low, and they're far below replacement rate. So this is a problem all over the developed world, and it's better in Norway and Denmark and those places, but they haven't solved the problem.
In the U.S., it's 1.78. The fertility.
Yeah, I saw 1.6 most recently. Yeah, that's right.
But of course, it's counterbalanced by immigration.
Exactly. Immigration is what makes the U.S. As well off as it is with regard to that fertility rate, because immigrants tend to have more children, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here, isn't it? And it's ironic, isn't it, that we're on the verge of shooting ourselves in the foot by the greatest mass deportation in the history of the world.
Yeah, there was an article. There was an article in the paper on that whole thing. If you get rid of all these immigrants who don't get Social Security but pay into Social Security, you're taking out a huge chunk of the pensions program. So
absolutely, and you're also taking a huge chunk out of who's going to pick all the crops and pluck all the chickens and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, Sharon posted on Facebook, I think, a meme that said, you think your food prices are high now, wait till they deport all of the workers, the field workers.
Absolutely. It's gonna, that's not exactly the way to fix inflation, is it?
Someone ought to tell President Trump about this.
Yeah, who's going to take care of the dirty laundry at Mar-a-Lago?
Hello. If I can chime in on this, I've got a video coming out in another 2 hours and 45 minutes on my YouTube channel where I allude to this problem. I mean, it's all over the place. And what I wanted to talk about, or what I'm inferring in my, or what I'm implying in my video, is that one of the issues is the tutoring, the Kwawe complex in Korea. And I think that alone is the primary factor in the high cost of raising children, which is the high cost of education. And all the money that's being spent on tutoring, and yet Chun Doo-hwan just made a decree there'll be no more tutoring and tried to close all the schools. Well, that lasted about 6 months. The drive to get extra care for the students. And I suggested in my video that the government should nationalize tutoring. They can't get rid of it, but the Ministry of Education ought to take it over and make it available to all. So it's not just a rich and poor dynamic, because that's the differentiating factor in Korean education now is, it used to be that rich and poor countries had a difference between how far you could go in free education. And I remember when we were in Korea first in the mid-60s, that families had to pay tuition for junior high. And then there was a grand celebration at some point in the 70s, I guess, when you didn't have to pay junior high tuition any longer, but you still had to pay high school tuition. Well, now high school tuition is free, but that doesn't remove the rich-poor dynamic within Korean education, because the wealthy can still afford all these extra sorts of Kwawe sort of things. So my proposal, for what it's worth, and nobody's listening to me, but my proposal was to make, Ned's listening, my proposal was to make Kwawe part of the school system and make it optional. Of course, it's by definition optional, but the poor child who can't afford it could then take advantage of certain things. And I also suggested that the Kwawe system be a little bit more diversified and pick up arts and music and sports that are really deficient in a hard driving STEM system that they've got now. So make me king and I'll solve all your problems, okay?
I wonder, just on that, point, it's a good idea. However, I wonder, since public education is free, it's true, but the reason that people are going to the Hagwons after school is because public education is deficient, right? This free public education. And for a long time, there were real disparities between the public education that you would receive in the countryside and in Seoul and places maybe that's not so much of an issue anymore, but I wonder if you were to have free after school education, whether you might run into those problems, so that you would have competition to get into the better Hagwons that are free, and the not so good Hagwons. Well, people would be left behind. That would be a natural occurrence, I would think.
That's what I wanted. Yeah, I wanted to ask Mark. Sorry, I wanted to ask Mark that too. I think there's a real ranking for the tutors who are most in demand. and some of them make, really, really nice amounts of money. And so I wonder if those people wouldn't remain private, that the wealthy could utilize.
I dropped my suggestion on a professor of education at Seoul National on my last trip there. Wondered what she would think of this idea of nationalizing the Hagwon system, and her response was the inertia. The social institutions are so well entrenched, there's just no way that it could happen. And there'd be the cost factor of it, I mean, yeah, you'd pay, if it's nationalized, how would that work out? And what do you do about these super wealthy Hagwon teachers? There was an article in the New York Times some years ago about the $4 million a year Hagwon teacher. And this was the guy who regularly got his students into the Sky universities. And he was charging a pretty penny, such that he was making $4 million a year. So he was the envy of every school teacher in the whole world, that someone could, this Korean Hagwon teacher is making $4 million a year. It's just unbelievable. But, I see this Hagwon thing as one of the issues to be solved. They didn't mention it in your video at all, Charlie, but I see it as one of the issues. But there's so many more. But I want to just end my comments with the idea that we here on the K1 Geezer Patrol have seen so many problems solved in Korea, over the years. And in a breath of hope and inspiration, I just want to say that somehow I think Korea is going to come up with a solution to this. And they're going to turn around and somewhere the family with 6 kids is the hero, and bang, that's what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I have faith, call it, that Korea is going to come up with a solution.
Yeah,
Mark, I have a question. This is Ed Baker.
Oh, Ed, good to see you.
Hi. Interesting idea, but I think Charlie has put his finger on a real problem. Is your proposal to require people by law to be in the national Hagwon system, or stop?
Stop. My idea is to make Hagwon. You can't remove Hagwon. It's so entrenched right now. But my idea is to make it free for any and all who want to go. And I think if that were the case, that there would be many young students who would say, well, yeah, I want to go to Hagwon, but I want to play tennis, or I want to go to the Hagwon, but I want to go to the swimming Hagwon. And, I want to do a more diversified sort of thing. And yeah, I like STEM education at school, but I would really like to play the piano and really work on that. And so I see it as a diversification, not an obligation. If I were king, that's the way I would do it.
But how would you persuade people who are making $4 million a year or $200,000 a year or whatever that they need to participate?
Well, obviously, if we nationalize the Hagwon system, as I'm suggesting, and made Hagwon teachers and certified Kyoyukbu teachers, their salary would be greatly reduced. And I would suppose there'd be some way of a bonus or incentive system, but I think you'd have to tell the $4 million man goodbye. It ain't going to happen. We're not going to pay you $4 million to work in this system. We might work out a bonus
but families system. Might still pay him $4 million.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly lots of problems with it, but I was sitting in a sidewalk cafe on a side street this last summer, and it was a side street whereby cars would come by just every minute or two, sometimes 2 or 3, but it was not a busy street. It was not a walking street. It was cars would come by from the neighborhood once in a while. And as we're sitting there, here goes a Mercedes-Benz, followed by another Mercedes-Benz. And 2 minutes later, here comes an Audi. And a few minutes later, here goes a Bentley. And a little while later, here goes a Ferrari. And it occurred to me, this is a cynical and sort of a damning phrase, but it occurs to me right now that that Koreans are very good at raising high-priced vehicles, but not very good at raising children, which means I think there has to be a value system shift of some kind to get from putting your values into a Bentley rather than into a child's education.
Yeah.
I have a general comment about the Huawei system and take you all back to when you were in Korea in the 1960s and later when I first went in the early 70s, the university student picking up his money by teaching people after class. The original Huawei means studying outside of school. That's all it means. And so, Mark, I want to 100% argue against the idea you have because you're looking at the top of a system of $4 million consultants and teachers and so forth. But I have spent a lot of time in my business in working with various aspects of Huawei and private education. And the main Huawei system that most people participate in is actually rather low priced. It's the selling of Haksupji by Nunnopi and other Kyoban and other companies that have legions of door-to-door salesmen that used to visit houses and provide them their weekly study sheets that are attuned to supplementing what's in the public school. So I think what you would do by nationalizing the system is just create another underground system because this is not about the fact that the public schools aren't good enough. Many of them are fairly good. It's about the fact that people feel they need to continue to study to compete and to get into certain areas they want to. I saw a presentation 12 years ago about specialist schools for kids who want to become K-pop stars. And there too, you're dealing with absolute overcompetition. You have one or two schools that specialize in that and a whole tutoring system around it. So I think what you're looking at if you want to change something is not the let's not buy expensive foreign cars, let's raise kids instead culture. I think you really want to look at the culture of competition and the way that if you call it a meritocracy or who gets the top, how that sorts itself out, especially in a Korea that with the change in the age structure of the population has really stopped growing and expanding the way you consider it to. If Samsung Semiconductor, Hyundai Automobile, biotech is expanding in Korea, you're talking about industries that employ less than 1% of the population. And you've got an economy that's chugging along in ways that doesn't really provide a whole range of opportunities outside of certain professions. So Mark, I think what you ought to look about is how people are competing, not how much they're paying for Huawei. The Huawei system is a huge problem, of course. And now that I have the floor, I want to turn it around and go back to what Charlie showed on his newspaper article. I think the difficulty the Korean government and any government has with policies, let's give men 2 months parental leave instead of 5 days, or let's give them a year, like in Denmark. I think the problem you have there, and it's worse in some countries than others, is for the person who's sitting there in his office and they have a new child, maybe if they're having child later in years, maybe say the man and women are in their early 30s, and they're going to a company office nominally 5 days a week, but being absent from that company office for 3 or 4 months, in many ways, it's not a question of money. It keeps you out of a very fast-moving office social environment and puts you behind. So I really think where the Korean government and Korean companies have to look at is the sort of environment that they provide for their employees when they're at work. Because the key negative for a man taking parental leave as he's out of the office. It's not that he's not getting money.
And also,
And a Korean woman also, same thing.
well, I was going to say, you know, the women also have a similar problem, and I made mention of this thing called the motherhood penalty, which is many young women these days, as you know, the rate of Korean women who are getting college educations is greater than it is for men.
Yes.
And probably most of these women are looking to have some kind of meaningful career. And so if they take maternity leave or have a child or then have another child, this is going to interfere with their career mobility, not to mention their earnings. These are all very serious problems that women are considering. So it's a serious problem, multi-dimensional problem. And another thing that I wanted to bring up, I don't want to lose this one because I think it's important, and it was mentioned in the documentary, and that is immigration, and the extent to which having larger numbers of foreign workers can help to fill the gaps, to support all of the older folks who are needing support as they get older. And this is something that is happening to a limited extent, but still is very much of a problem going forward in Korea. It's hard to think that that it will be accepted at a large scale, as it is a problem around the world now, as everybody knows.
So, Charlie, did you follow the Philippine caregivers drama that's been going on?
No, tell us about it.
Well, there's a program sponsoring Philippine caregivers to come in, and there's been a big debate about how much of it's supposed to be childcare and how much of it's supposed to be cleaning and doing the laundry and so forth. But they're not expanding it. The last headline I saw was it's successful, but they're not going to expand it. But another point was most of them are working, I think, in Gangnam. So the program is, benefiting the people, the privileged part of the population.
Right.
So the families pay that, or the government pays that?
I think the families pay, but I believe there's a government subsidy for it.
It's like the au pair program here, young people come from other countries. I mean,
Right.
it seems, and I guess I just wonder, are those women who are freezing their eggs really going to ever use those eggs? I mean, what is that?
Right. I think the caregivers don't reside with the family.
Oh, they don't. They're not living.
They don't. They come in and work for 8 hours or whatever it is.
So I'm going to combine your Filipino program with Mark's comment. You mentioned taking care of the family and also work, but you didn't mention English teaching that the Filipino maids do. The Gangnam families for years have been bringing them in to teach their kids English as well as take care of the house.
Well, they should bring in people from the United States. Just think, if they did have an au pair program there, then their kid would learn English, and they, that would just, or bring them in from Europe or something.
Isn't that what Peace Corps did? That was us in Peace Corps. We lived in these families, taught the kids English.
Go ahead, Charlie.
One of the problems, of course, is that
I think in the documentary, it was very telling when the woman said, people just, they may, or whoever it was said, they may not be racist per se, but they don't want to spend that much time with non-Koreans.
Right. No, it's definitely easier said than done, a lot easier said than done. And of course, what we're talking about here, the Gangnam families, for the most part, can take care of themselves. and we're not really worried so much
The
about them.
Mercedes.
And I don't have the statistics broken down to see how it works, but I suspect that the fertility rate among the richest segment of the Korean population is probably higher than it is for other levels of the
Yeah,
population.
probably.
I may be wrong about that. It would be interesting if anybody knows the answer to that. But it's the rest of the population that we're worried about here, which is the great majority, the vast majority of Koreans.
So
Isn't this issue 0.7% is all that separates the US and Korea? And so maybe the crisis is Korea today, but it's only 20 years away, say, from the US being in the same place.
Oh yeah, we're looking at similar problems down the road. Not as soon as Korea, but Korea is in the lead, is showing us the way.
So we need to hurry and get our order in for our AI doll.
Right.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I was going to ask, I was going to take orders actually before
that is so
before we're done
sad.
to see who
my
wants to sign up.
Was that creepy or not?
Oh my
it was.
God.
And it was so poignant and pathetic,
That
really.
broke my heart. Oh my
Hyo,
Yes, it was. It
and
was
they call her a
heartbreaking.
Hyo.
Heartbreaking.
They call her a Hyo doll. A Hyo doll. And she's
Hyodol.
The doll reminded me a lot of one my mother made for my sister, and was a member of our household, I guess, for many, many years. And the idea, when the doll started speaking, I was creeped out. There's no doubt about it.
It was pretty creepy. It was
She
pretty
sends
creepy.
his the clothes away to get Oh, it was just so sad.
I think the whole doll is sent away. So you don't have a naked doll
that's right.
to comfort you.
Oh, that was so sad. But what about the lineage? What about just wanting your family? So they're stopping it. They're just,
Continuation of the family line. That's all very much very attenuated nowadays. Maybe our friends, the professors Kim and Moon can speak to that, but that's my understanding certainly that in parts of the countryside, certainly it still exists, but for the most part, and Korean is 98% urban. The lineage values are disappearing. Would you agree with that?
it sounds like it. Yeah, well, I just remember when we had that talk when we were in Portland about, the importing of the wives from other underdeveloped countries, and, the multicultural, this whole, now we have a mixed race child or whatever. It just feels so different. It is so different than the Korea that we remember, and it's just.
Yeah. Well, it used to be, there was this problem during the 1980s and into the 1990s of female selective abortions. And people were aborting, they were finding out the sex of the fetus. And then if the fetus was female, they would abort it because you want to have a son, right? And so what that resulted in was a much higher proportion of males being born over a generation, really, than females. But nowadays, that's a thing of the past now. That's not a problem. Actually, the worm has turned, and now all of these surveys that have been done so that young people, when asked if they have a child, whether they would prefer to have a girl or a boy, they overwhelmingly say a girl.
And part of the logic is when your daughter grows up, she'll still have some devotion toward her parents and may help them out, where the son is just going to be controlled by his wife.
But then
Well,
the
yeah,
girl
that's
goes
exactly
away and
right.
lives with her. What about the girl and her mother-in-law? I thought that's why they weren't getting married anymore. They didn't want to deal with their mother-in-law.
That's
Well-
why they moved. That's why they moved into apartments to get away from the mother-in-law.
Yeah, they
Oh my-
can't, they can't live with them. I mean, the apartments are so small that they can't, they don't have room for the mother-in-law anymore, right?
When I was Fulbright director, I had a staff member who said that exact thing. She said she moved into a small apartment, so Shiomani can't move in. But
Oh,
you know what
that's-
you said, Charlie, about the selective abortions of female fetuses is one of the points that I have on my data set about how Korea solves its problems. You know, that at that point in the 90s, when they were aborting all these female fetuses, and there were elementary schools in the conservative Gyeongsang-bukdo area, that the kids coming into the first grade were 16 little boys and no girls. And that I
Kind of what
saw
happened
as
in China, right?
yeah, and that was a huge problem in the making, but Korea has solved that problem, and I have some
now
optimism they'll
those
solve
16
this
boys,
too.
16 boys in the elementary school class, their mothers are all native Vietnamese speakers. Because
Oh my
the men
gosh.
can't get Korean wives, they have to bring them over from Vietnam.
Right.
And
And then they
Uzbekistan
run
and
away.
Philippines.
Remember, we learned that those women,
Yeah, a
they
lot of
thought
them
they
do.
were coming to the land of K-pop, and they end up in the country with a 50-year-old husband, and then they run away or something. I remember.
There are cases that work out too.
Oh,
Are
yeah,
there?
absolutely, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
And supposedly
I
they prefer women from rural Vietnam because they have more conservative values and are less likely to take off.
And probably will work
Good
harder.
Confucian wives. Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I saw a paper about this whole issue of son preference and selective abortions, and it's continues to be a problem in Vietnam, whereas it's the problem in Korea it's not a problem anymore.
So
Do we
speaking,
have any idea what the fertility rate of the mixed couples where the wife is an immigrant is compared to the general, the extremely low ones?
We had a presentation in Portland, but I don't think the number of children came up.
Yeah, I don't think
Oh,
so.
because she was only studying the mixed race kids and how well they were doing up in through high school. But
Right.
that was one of the things you folks brought up, that they needed to study the involvement of the native Korean fathers.
That was Dick's.
Whether that was
Dick's Griff
yeah,
brought that up.
and
Right.
probably the birth rate. Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to make reference to, a number of a number of things that I've read, and the professor at the very end of the documentary talked about how there needs to be a widespread change in values, and this needs to cross-cut the entire society. So, and the way I saw it referred to in one publication was that we need to have holistic policies. Holistic is the term that I would stress, for healthy and active aging, labor market and pension reform, family friendliness, better immigration, and promoting reproductive rights and empowerment. That's a big thing to swallow. That's saying a lot. And how is such a thing going to happen? well, I don't know, but
Yeah, that's rework society A to Z.
well, in many
How long will
respects.
that take? Oh,
Well,
dear.
and the woman early in the documentary said that she didn't want all of the pressure about the consumerism, about what she was wearing and what brands her children were
Right.
wearing and what stroller she had, and you know that pressure to be and show off, that was just having a child was just another element of that she wasn't going to buy into.
Well, maybe, you know, I mean, one of the things that we can always, the one constant in life is change, right? You know, Korea has changed incredibly, and sort of echoing Mark's remark that having faith that the Koreans have the power and determination to make things happen for the better. That you know, maybe you know, this is all kind of pessimistic view that looking at all of these problems, but one can hope anyway that there's momentum for change, and people are certainly. It's not that people aren't aware of it. Everybody in Korea knows that this is a problem. Everybody who was interviewed in the documentary understood that this was a problem, from the professors down to the cashiers in the supermarkets. Everybody is aware of it, and so the question becomes, you know, what next, and what's going to happen over the course of the next decade or two. One might hope that changes will happen that will help to alleviate at least some of these problems.
Well, and like here, if the people with the power to make big changes are often the people who don't want any change, thank you very much. So
Make Korea great again.
You're here.
Oh.
If I could say something on another subject, which was referred to at the beginning of this conversation. Just before we started, I learned that President Yoon is is being further detained.
Yes.
I mean, he's
Being arrested.
Right.
arrested,
Yeah.
fully arrested. The arrangement under which the warrant under which he first came only provided for 48 hours of detention, and now he's got something more long term.
20 days, I think.
Yeah.
So I wonder, Ed, on that note, you know, whether, you know, like this new pronouncement that was issued in June of last year, just about 6 months ago, about this, you know, to really get at this problem in a big, comprehensive way. You know, I wonder what the chances of anything like that happening, along with other things that happen in the government now that basically are things at a standstill. Do you think, Ed? Things just aren't happening, or
I'm not sure what you're referring to, Charlie.
well, I'm referring, for example, the newspaper story that I showed about the new initiatives that were promulgated by Yoon Suk-yeol to really address this problem in a much more comprehensive
And bring up the
way. I
fertility
wonder
rate.
to what extent
Yeah,
like that.
and that doesn't seem to be happening at all. Just viewed from the point of view of the continuous drop of the fertility rate.
Well, that was just this past June that he was saying, okay, we need to do even more even more than we've been doing.
Well, so
Whether
far,
that and whether even if they did put that in place, whether that would have the desired effect, we don't know.